Reading for February 17th. Science of Mind, A Philosophy of Faith, A Way of Life by Ernest Holmes. Reading from page 103, paragraph 4, through page 114, paragraph 1, using inclusive language. We are on the verge of disclosing a spiritual universe and will ultimately conclude that what we call the physical universe is a spontaneous emergence through evolution of inner forces which cannot be explained, but which must be accepted. How then can we doubt that the very mind which we now use is the intelligent principle from which all life draws its power to be and its intelligence to express? The furtherance of evolution depends upon our ability to sense a unity with nature and its forces. When the knowledge of this unity comes alike to all, the tread of armies will cease, and the bugle will echo the soft notes of love for one another. Immortality. Suppose we should be able to view the world, not as we do now from one plane, but from 10 different planes. What would happen? We should certainly see 10 times as much as we do now. The present hypothesis of science is that ether is more solid than matter, and this means that there could be a form within the very form of one's body now occupies in space. There might be innumerable bodies, each within the other, and each would be just as real as the one we now think we occupy. The universe as we see it is not even a fractional part of the universe that actually is. Eye hath not seen, etc., because it sees only on one plane and only in part. From the standpoint of immortality, we may have a body within a body to infinity. When this physical body is rendered useless and is no longer a fit instrument through which to function, another one may already be there. The physical disappearance of Jesus after his resurrection was the result of the spiritualization of his consciousness. This so quickened his mentality that his body disintegrated and his followers could not see him because he was on another plane. Planes are not places, they are states of consciousness. Is it apparent that spirit can know nothing outside itself, that whatever the spirit knows must be a definite mental image, concept, or idea in the consciousness of the spirit? Is it clear that the self-consciousness of spirit knows within itself, it knows upon itself as law? Is it clear that the law can never say, I will not, but can only act as instructed? And is it clear that the spirit lets fall the form of its thoughts into the soul or subjectivity of the universe? These thoughts must manifest as things, as form, as body. A divine mental picture. As we look at the many millions of forms, all of different shape and color, and yet know that they all come from one stuff, are we not compelled to accept the fact that there is a specific cause or concrete mental image back of every idea or thing, a divine mental picture? In the subjective world, there must be a correspondent of everything in the objective world, and since the subjective world is a receptive or plastic substance, this correspondence can find its initial starting point only in real intelligence. Therefore, intelligence is the ultimate creative agency of the universe. Man's relationship to spiritual universe. Man reenacts the nature of God. Whatever is true of the universe as a whole must also be true of the individual as part of this whole. We are evolved from the universe as a self-conscious thinking center of living spirit, and as such, we must, in our nature and being, reproduce the universe. If we realize that God is triune and that we are a spiritual likeness of God, we shall see that the whole scheme of life and the whole nature of divine being is reenacted through us. This, of course, does not mean that we are God. It means that in our small world of individual expression, our nature is identical with God's. This is what Jesus meant when he said, "As the divine hath life within itself, so hath it given to us to have life within ourselves." This reference to inherent life, real life, that is the only life God could have. We must expect to find in us, therefore, the same inherent attributes that we find in the universe from which we spring. A single drop of water is not the whole ocean, but it does contain within itself the same qualities and attributes. We are made of and from life. As effect must partake of the nature of its cause, so we must partake of the divine nature from which we spring. We did not create our nature. We cannot change its inherent reality. We are what we are, and we use this nature for better or for worse. Being what we are, there is a certain responsibilities that go with our natures, certain obligations. If our thought is creative, and if we have selectivity, that is, volition and choice, and if we are unfolding to a discovery of our true nature, which must already be perfect, then the obligation and responsibility of this nature could impose freedom or bondage upon us temporarily, but our bondage cannot be real from the standpoint of the absolute. The world has learned all it should through suffering. The science of mind and spirit makes a tremendous claim when it states that the individual should be free from bondage of sickness, poverty, and unhappiness. It does, however, carefully set forth the conditions under which freedom operates and the laws governing life, stating in no uncertain terms that unless we understand these conditions and obey these laws, we will not receive full benefit from its teachings. The world is beginning to realize that it has learned all it should learn through suffering and pain. Surely there can be no intelligence in the universe that wishes us to be sick, suffer pain, be unhappy, and end in oblivion. Surely, if God or universal intelligence is imbued with goodness, then it could not ordain that we should ultimately be other than the perfect expression of life. We have shown that our nature is the same as God's nature. We should have no intellectual difficulty realizing that an infinite intelligence could not make an automatic individuality, and this explains why we suffer on our road to self-discovery. Our suffering is not God-ordained because we create our own experience as we become individualized. By individuality is meant self-choice, volition, conscious mind, personified spirit, complete freedom, and a power to back up that freedom. We cannot imagine a mechanical or unspontaneous individuality. To be real and free, individuality must be created in the image of perfection and let alone to make the great discovery for ourselves. Freedom or bondage. We therefore arrive at the conclusion that while bondage is an experience, there is a reality to which bondage is not real. To that reality, bondage is not even illusion or hallucination. There is a part of us that is never fooled. That is why, in the midst of great trial, death, or any of our suffering, something arises from within and says with Job, "Though I die, yet shall I live." Freedom of will means the ability to do, say, and think as one wishes, to express life as one personally desires. To be able merely to think and dream of freedom would not be liberty. A prisoner under a life sentence can do that. To imagine without the power to manifest such imagination would be to remain in a dream world which would never come to self-realization. This is not the world in which we live at all, for our world is one of self-expression, even though this expression appears to limit us. We are in an infinite mind, and infinite mind is also in us. It is by this mind that we think. This mind is eternal, therefore we are eternal. This mind is complete, therefore we are spiritually complete, though we do not appear to be so. This does not alter the fact that potential beings are just as perfect as is the inherent God. As Jesus said, "Fear not, little flock, it is Creator's great pleasure to give you the kingdom." If it is Creator's good pleasure to give us the kingdom, we should learn how to receive and use it. A freedom under compulsion would amount to the worst kind of bondage. The Bible says, "If there had been any law whereby this freedom could be compelled, then verily by the law would that freedom have been given." If there had been a way by which divine creative principle could have compelled us to suddenly appear on the scene of experience full orbed with all our freedom and still be an individual, then verily by the law would this have been done. But even Creator could not do this. The only way Creator can evolve a spontaneous individual is to let us alone and allow us to awaken to ourselves. "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." So, we must be created with the possibility of limitless freedom and let alone to discover ourselves. On the road to self-discovery, we must be subject to the law of reality, and if in ignorance we violate this law, we must thereby suffer. This is not, however, because any divine decree orders suffering, but simply because it is the necessity of the case. Creator never intended us to suffer. Suffering may be salutary in that it leads us to a place where we learn that it is unnecessary. We shall cease to suffer as we more and more comply with the laws of the universe. All suffering is the result of some infringement of these laws. It is a solace to the mind when we come to understand that all our limitations, from the standpoint of the divinity within us, are unnecessary. We recognize that we experience pain, but how could there be an eternal reality to pain? If this were true, we would have a suffering universe, a suffering creator, an agonizing deity, all of which seem untrue, unreal, and impossible. We must know definitely and consistently that the universe is for us and not against us. But someone will say, "The universe is not for us. Look at all the evil, the limitation, lack, and physical pain and anguish of people." We shall have to learn that evil is neither person, place, nor thing of itself, but is an experience which we are allowed to have because of our divine individuality. Until, through negative consequences, we learn to use the law affirmatively, to cooperate with it, and thus to enjoy its full benefits. For the true law is a law of liberty and not of bondage. The universe is foolproof. It does say we can have what we can take, while at the same time we must expect to experience the logical result of our thought and act, be it good or what we call evil. The meaning of freedom implies the possibility of suffering, because if we are free only by virtue of the possibility of choosing more than one course of action as an experience. There is no freedom or happiness as a spontaneous individuality, unless there can be a temporary restriction of bondage and unhappiness through the wrong use of freedom. All things are possible to the infinite, but the infinite forever remains true to its own nature and never contradicts itself. If we take our images of thought only from our previous experiences, then we continue in bondage which those previous experiences created. If we talk about discord, we shall become more discordant. The more the world arms for war, the more certain it is that there will be war. People who spend all their time complaining about their unhappiness become more unhappy. Jesus understood these great laws of cause and effect in the universe, which work sometimes with apparent slowness, but always with sureness. Eventually, we shall understand that all of our bondage is an invention of ignorance. Punishment and reward. Before we leave the subject of bondage and freedom, we wish to make clear that there is no sin but a mistake, and no punishment but an inevitable consequence. Wrongdoing must be punished, for the law of cause and effect must be eternally operative. Right acts are rewarded in the same manner. We do not say that we cannot sin. What we say is that we do sin or make mistakes, and we are thereby automatically punished as long as we continue to make mistakes. But bondage is not real to the universe, and sin is not real to Creator. This does not mean that we can do whatever we wish, with disregard for the consequences, nor does the fact that we are punished for our mistakes mean that there is an evil power in the universe. It does mean that there is an immutable law of cause and effect running through everything. We are not punished for our sins, but by them. Sin is its own punishment, and righteousness is its own reward. The age-long disgust of the problem of evil will never be answered until we realize that evil is not a thing of itself. It is simply a misuse of the law of freedom. The problem of evil will be met only to the degree that we cease doing evil and do good, for evil will disappear when we no longer indulge in it. When the whole world sees the right and does it, then, and not until then, will the problem of evil be solved for us all. Spirit, soul, and body. It is necessary that we understand the unity of all life, the unity of God and ourselves on all three planes. We have studied universal spirit, universal subjectivity, which is called the soul of the universe, and universal spirit in manifestation, which is called the physical universe or the body of Creator. Studying ourselves, we find that our body, like the physical universe, devoid of mind or intelligence, has no volition. It may be permeated with intelligence, but it is not intelligent. It is one with the body of Creator, the physical universe. What did we learn about the soul of the universe? Remember the qualities that were discussed under the head of subjectivity, and you will find all of them depicted in what is called the subjective nature of people. For our subconscious or subjective mind reproduces all of the attributes belonging to universal subjective mind. When we turn to the spirit of people, we find that it is one with the Spirit of God, i.e., we are a self-conscious, thinking, choosing center of individualized intelligence or divine consciousness in the great whole. So, we find that we are one with everything physical in the physical world, one with the soul of the universe in the subjective world, and one with the Spirit of Creator in the conscious world. Through that which we call our objective or conscious mind comes what we know of Creator and life. The objective or conscious mind is the spirit mind from which we have been looking, but it is not fully developed. If this were not so, there would be no mind with which to look. The objective mind must be the spiritual mind of people, since it is the only thing about us which knows that we have life and are conscious of ourselves. The whole of spirit is potentially focused in our individual objective consciousness, but we have not yet evolved to a realization of this except in a slight degree. We approach and contact the larger spirit through our own spirit or conscious mind. The doorway to the Absolute stands open at the center of our intuitive perception. We enter the Absolute through that which appears to be finite because the finite must be drawn from the infinite. This spirit which animates us is the same spirit which animates all life and everything that lives. Emerson said that we animate what we see and we see what we animate. The reason for this being that only as we truly see can the divine harmony be reflected through us and animate that which is seen. The spirit of people is equipped with decision, will, choice, volition, intellect, and purpose. It is the microcosm within the macrocosm, which means the little world within the big world. It is also called the image of Creator. It is the kinship of the Creator. It is Emmanuel, or God with us. It is the Christ, or Logos, which means the Word. It can reason both deductively and inductively. The spirit of people seems to have an external and an internal perception. Its external perception is by appearance, its internal through intuition. Appearance would limit the future possibility of people to the uses we have already made of life, and thus circumscribe the infinite. Hence we are told to judge righteously and not by appearances. Plotinus tells us that there are three ways by which we gather knowledge: through science, through opinion, and through intuition or illumination. These channels represent spiritual capacities, since each is an avenue leading to self-knowingness, and self-knowingness is the very nature and essence of spirit. Science is spirit including its own laws. Intuition is spirit knowing itself. Opinion is our estimate of reality. All are spiritual faculties and should be so considered in the study of this science. We are going into a broader divinity from age to age as more and more reality opens before our onward march in our eternal progress. We should think of our own spirit as being some part of the universal spirit, and of our minds as open to the divine influx. As any specific knowledge must come from the center of all knowledge, it follows that whenever and wherever our mind is open to the divine influx, we will receive instruction directly from the center and source of all. Science, invention, art, literature, philosophy, and religion have one common center from which, through experience, is drawn all knowledge. We should neither separate spirit from matter, physical form, from that which gives form, nor life from living. To suppose that one must retire from the world to be spiritual is one of the greatest possible mistakes. This is directly opposed to the self-evident truth that spirit enjoys itself only in its own works, which is its self-manifestation. We enter into the spirit of life only as we enter into the spirit of living.